posted to our website as soon as we can get it posted. This is Cascade's targeted tag meeting number 5. Just a reminder, our previous target tag meeting number 5 got moved and joined up with our last targeted tag, which will be now targeted tag 7 with the resource integration section. Just a reminder, I'm Brian Robertson, manager of supply resource planning. I do see, we're not going to go through introductions, but I do see a lot of new names in the chat. So if you are a presenter or you come off mute to ask a question, please introduce yourself and mention which company you're representing. That way people can get familiarized with other folks on the call. All right, so we do have a lot of material today, so I'm just gonna keep moving us forward. But reminder, just feel free to raise your hand or put a question in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat throughout the meeting. But feel free to raise your hand, come off mute, and ask a question at any point during the presentation. So we'll go through a quick safety moment, and then we'll have a presentation on environmental policy. We'll talk a little bit about local policy, and then what we're keeping an eye on at the national focus. And then we'll open it up for any additional feedback at the end, and then we'll discuss next steps. So just a quick safety moment on power lines. Make sure we keep workers and equipment at least 10 feet away from overhead power lines. Never touch anything in contact with the power line. If a power line is down and touching the ground, just assume that it is dangerous and don't approach it. And then don't step in any water near a downed line. All right, with that, I'm going to pass it over to Megan.
Perfect. Thank you, Brian.
Yep.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Megan Kelzer, and I am an environmental specialist with Montana Dakota Utilities and Cascade Natural Gas. This morning, I will be presenting some of the environmental topics. Cascade is an energy provider serving Washington and Oregon, as we have an important role in securing a lower carbon future. The material presented today represents topics that environmental and other departments monitor, from state, regional, local environmental regulatory, or legislative aspects that could have an impact on Cascade's IRP planning process. Cascade, along with MDU Resources Group and other natural gas companies, has established a greenhouse gas reduction target to reduce methane emissions 30% by 2035, which is compared to 2022 levels. The environmental policy reads, to operate efficiently to meet the needs of present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Our environmental goals are to minimize waste and maximize resources, be a good steward of the environment while providing high quality and reasonable price products and services, and to comply with or surpass all applicable environmental laws, regulations, and permit requirements. Okay, the Climate Commitment Act was established in 2023 as it aims to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 95% by 2050. This is an annual statewide emission cap that declines over time, as covered entities must surrender one compliance instrument for every metric ton of CO2e emitted. The declining cap creates a long-term incentive to reduce emissions. Covered entities include natural gas utilities, fuel suppliers, electric utilities, emissions-intensive trade exposed entities, also known as EITE entities. Starting in 2027, this will include waste-to-energy facilities, And starting in 2031, this will include railroads. Currently, EITE entities are given no-cost allowances until 2034 to reduce leakage in Washington state to cover their compliance costs. Legislature is currently undergoing a rulemaking regarding the allowance options for 2035 to 2050 as we are monitoring that rulemaking. There are around 40 EITE facilities located in Washington state, and the Department of Ecology does have a list of those 40 EITE facilities if anyone is interested. Currently, the Climate Commitment Act is organized into 4-year compliance periods. For example, 2023 to 2026, 2027 to 2030, and so on. However, due to linkage, ecology is undergoing a rulemaking as the compliance periods do have a potential to change. We are actively monitoring this linkage rulemaking, and I will discuss linkage in a future slide. For compliance deadlines, they occur November 1st each year as entities must submit compliance instruments equal to 30% of their covered emissions from the prior year. The remaining 70% is due at the end of the 4-year compliance period, and that will be held November 1st of 2027. Cascade covered emissions under the Climate Commitment Act. These can vary depending on weather between 1.7 to 1.9 million metric tons of CO2e annually. And this includes all core and non-core customers that are below that CCA reporting threshold and customers that have not opted into the CCA individually. Not covered are the large covered entities that are over the threshold, which is the 25,000 metric tons of CO2e per year, EITE entities, national security facilities, and customers that choose to comply directly under the Climate Commitment Act. Operational emissions are approximately around 25,000 metric tons of CO2e per year, and that also includes methane leaks and fuel combustion from compressor stations. Under the Climate Commitment Act, entities must acquire enough compliance instruments equal to their covered entities, and some of the compliance options include no-cost allowances, and these are received each year at no cost, and these will decline over the years. And I do have a future slide discussing no-cost allowances in greater detail. Auction allowances, which are purchased through auctions or the secondary market. Offset credits, which are defined as an alternate credit to allowances. However, they can only be used up to 8% of the company's emissions for the first compliance period. By purchasing an offset credit, a business can fund a project that reduces or removes greenhouse gas emissions somewhere else. Renewable natural gas, which is a one-for-one replacement of geological gas emissions through renewable thermal credits, also known as RTCs. Energy efficiency and demand-side management, and other, which is hydrogen, carbon captured, synthetic methane, which are future considerations. The Department of Ecology is actively pursuing linking jurisdictions with California and Quebec as the linkage agreement was signed in June of 2026. In a linked market, allowances issued by California and Quebec can be used in Washington for compliance and vice versa. The 3 jurisdictions would host a joint allowance auction and would share common allowance price. Market participants would also trade allowances across jurisdictions. Larger markets are usually more stable with consistent pricing because there is a larger pool of buyers and sellers, as that can reduce price swings. Ecology anticipates the Washington jurisdiction will link in 2027 as Ecology is undergoing a rulemaking. Environmental, along with other departments, are actively monitoring this rulemaking. The Washington Climate Commitment Act no-cost allowances, they are received each year at no cost. Covered entities cannot sell or trade to other entities, and they must be used for compliance only. This is intended to protect customers from cost impacts, as low-income bill credits are the #1 priority. Starting in 2023, utilities must consign 65% of the no-cost allowances received, and that increases 5% each year until it reaches 100% in 2030 at auctions. The linkage rulemaking has proposed a change in the no-cost allowance projection, which is demonstrated in the graph shown. The blue colored is the projected no-cost allowance allocation, while the purple is the original rule. I see Byron has a hand up.
Hello, this is Byron Harmon from the Washington UTC. If we go back a slide where you discussed the expected timeline of the linkage agreement, what are the repercussions or like the consequences of that timeline in terms of the company's like costs associated with CCA? Does the company expect, and obviously there are limitations what the company can say due to like the confidentialities and stuff associated with the CCA, the auction parameters, but is the company expected to continue buying Washington allowances out until the market begins operating with the joint market, or how does that timeline dynamic impact compliance costs?
Yeah, that is a good question. I don't believe we can discuss buying activities due to confidential reasons. If anyone else has any information regarding that, feel free to jump on. But due to confidential reasons, I don't believe I can discuss buying activities in the auction market.
Yeah, I was just gonna hop in and say that we will probably be modeling in the IRP the current CCA and then a scenario around linkage. So there might be some information within our modeling that may shed some light on our how we plan to meet the CCA. I don't know if we have any information for you today, but yeah, I think throughout our modeling in the longer tag meetings, there may be more information in there.
All right. Thank you, Brian. I appreciate that.
Yep.
And if we can just jump to the next slide. Perfect. Thank
Yeah.
you. Almost done with this slide. Last comment, the proposed no-cost allowance projection does front-load compliance instruments compared to the current projection, and this still represents a 2015 to 2019 average baseline.
Great. Just real quick, I think we're going to move on to CPP discussion. So I wanted to check to see if there were any other questions on the CCA before we continue on.
Hey Brian, this is Devin. I'll just jump in really quick. I was having trouble getting off mute there. Byron, I do want to give some context to the first part of your question though. So while we can't explicitly talk about our buying activities and how we will kind of adapt to linkage, I think, linkage is a very important subject for all players, right? I don't think we're giving away anything saying that everybody is or should be paying attention to it. And how it will impact, just I guess to educate for those who are curious, the timing of linkage is going to be extremely important for all market participants. Our understanding is if linkage occurs before the first compliance period, which is November, or before demonstration of first compliance period, which would be November 1st of 2027. And if the rulemaking is finalized as it's currently written or as we would expect it to be, then compliance entities would be allowed to utilize California allowances, which, just for reference, are priced significantly lower than Washington allowances, California, Quebec allowances. So they're priced at in the 30s, while Washington allowances are priced in the 50s today. So that is a consideration. I don't want to speculate as to what we think will happen. What I think Megan was saying in the last slide was just what ecology's perspective is. It's ecology's position right now that they expect linkage to happen in 27. I think the market is generally a bit uncertain about that, which is kind of reflected in that actual pricing dynamic right now. And it's going to be fascinating to watch how that continues to evolve. And we're going to be responsive to that, obviously. I think acting too extreme in either direction, either assuming that it would 100% happen or not happen, would probably be, and I want to be very careful about what I say. I don't want to be giving away anything on activity, but I think acting just in general, any kind of extreme action on taking one position one way or another would probably be too speculative. So I think we're going to continue to take a very metered conservative approach, just as we always like to do, and evaluate conditions and be risk responsive.
All right, thanks, Devin. I see Wesley, you have your hand up.
Hi, this is Wesley with the Washington UTC. Different question than that topic. So I'm wondering, depending on like how you decide to use allowance revenue, whether it's for bill credits, decarb activities, and the decarb activities can vary depending on if it's like RNG or potentially fuel switching, and depending on each of those, how you choose to implement the spend, that's going to impact demand in some way, I think. So I'm wondering how interactive your modeling will be in terms of modeling this out. If the scenarios you run, depending on different allowance revenue potentially, will feedback and change things. Does that make sense? I guess I'm just wondering how the potential outcomes of how you choose to spend the money are going to be reflected in the modeling.
Yeah, thanks, Wesley. I know regulatory was working through a docket on some of that information. From a modeling perspective, we're going to make that as interactive as we can. Now, I don't have enough information yet to make any impacts to our modeling, but we still have a few months before we're going to start locking down our modeling results. So I don't have anything for you today, but that's definitely going to be a topic of discussion over the next couple of months to see how that revenue will be utilized in impacting the modeling.
Helpful. Thank you.
Yep. All right. If there are no other questions, I'll pass it back to Megan.
Thank you. The Oregon Climate Protection Program is a statewide initiative to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, aiming to reduce 50% by 2035 and 90% by 2050. Covered entities must comply with the annual emission caps, and covered entities include fuel suppliers, natural gas suppliers, large industrial facilities, the EITE, and direct natural gas, also known as DNG sources. However, they are exempt from the first compliance period and they will not receive any compliance instruments. The Cascade Covered emissions vary between 500,000 to 700,000 metric tons of CO2e, and this can also vary depending on weather. And this includes all core and non-core customers, excluding electric generating facilities and EITE facilities. Sources excluded from the cap include the natural gas distribution system, which is on average 8,500 metric tons of CO2e per year, as that is reported to Oregon DEQ. Emissions from biomass-derived fuels, for example, renewable natural gas. Emissions from non-combustion use of natural gas, and emissions from electric generating plant units. Compliance options under the Oregon Climate Protection Program include no-cost compliance instruments, which are allocated annually and they decline. I will have a future slide going into depth on that. Community climate investments, which are CCI credits that are generated when entities contribute funds to a CCI credit entity. The entity will then invest those funds into projects that reduce greenhouse gas emissions in Oregon, prioritizing the environmental justice communities. Currently, DEQ has chosen CalSTART as their CCI entity. DEQ aims to complete this agreement by 2026, and once the agreement is signed, CalSTART will be an approved CCI entity. Other compliance options include renewable natural gas, energy efficiency and demand side management, and other, which is the hydrogen, carbon capture, synthetic methane, which are future considerations. Each year, Oregon DEQ distributes free compliance instruments to regulated entities. There are unlimited banking on these compliance instruments, as covered entities may also trade compliance instruments. This graph demonstrates the no-cost allocation of compliance instruments allocated by Oregon DEQ. The graph represents a 50% reduction by baseline by 2035 and a 90% reduction from baseline by 2050. Currently, Oregon DEQ is undergoing a rulemaking regarding EITE no-cost compliance instrument allocation. DEQ has proposed to distribute compliance instruments and additional flexibility to EITE entities, as that can impact non-EITE entities. This can create uncertainty of our allocation in the future. However, this rulemaking is still in progress, and this doesn't change our current allocation until the rulemaking is finalized. Under the Oregon Climate Protection Program, the compliance periods is 3 years. 2025 to 2027 for the first period, and then 2 consecutive calendar years, for example, 2028 to 2029, 2030 to 2031, and so on. The first compliance demonstration event is November of 2028 for the first compliance period. And to demonstrate compliance, a covered entity must submit compliance instruments or CCI credits for each metric ton of CO2e emitted of the total compliance obligation. Okay, and I will pass it off to my coworker, Shauna. Thank you.
Yeah, and Shauna, before you get going, are there any questions on the CPP? Not seeing anything in the chat or any hands popping up, so I think we're good to continue on. Thanks, Megan.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Shauna Nierod. I'm an environmental specialist with Cascade and Montana Dakota Utilities. And I'll be talking about our operations emissions. So as part of our commitment to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and achieving our methane reduction goals, we have developed a comprehensive greenhouse gas inventory to track and manage emissions. This inventory serves as a foundation for measuring performance, identifying reduction opportunities, and monitoring progress over time. So one component of our methane reduction strategy is the continued replacement of aging pipeline infrastructure through SSIP projects. By upgrading and replacing older pipe main and service lines with modern materials, we enhance our system reliability while reducing the potential for methane leaks. In 2025, we replaced approximately 10 miles of main and 454 service lines in Washington and Oregon. We are also members of a number of industry organizations, including the One Future Coalition, AGA, and GTI Energy. Through our participation in these groups, we collaborate to share best practices, technical knowledge, evaluate emerging technologies, and develop effective emission reduction strategies. By participating in these collaborative efforts, we remain actively engaged in identifying opportunities to further reduce emissions and improve environmental performance. Our damage prevention team utilizes a variety of marketing and outreach platforms to educate customers, contractors, excavators, and the general public about the importance of calling 811 before digging and following safe excavation practices around natural gas facilities. In recent years, we've expanded our digital marketing efforts to strengthen engagement through existing channels and reach new audiences through innovative platforms. By increasing awareness of underground utility safety and promoting responsible excavation practices, Cascade is extending its pipeline safety education to a broader range of stakeholders. Go ahead, Brian. Another part of our methane mitigation strategy, Cascade continues to evaluate opportunities to reduce emissions associated with routine maintenance activities, including pipeline purges and blowdowns. So one technology we are currently considering is cross compression, which captures natural gas from isolated pipeline sections and transfers it to an active portion of the system rather than venting it to the atmosphere. In addition, our engineering team incorporates emission reduction considerations into the design of new facilities and system improvements. Since 2024, we've been partnering with Picaro in using advanced mobile leak detection technology, or AMLD, as a tool to identify, quantify, and prioritize the repair of leaks, as well as to enhance our operational performance and improve safety for our customers and employees. At the end of 2025, we finished our first survey of Washington's distribution system and have initiated a second survey. We are also leveraging this AMLD technology to support the implementation of the Veritas project to improve the accuracy of our emissions tracking and reporting. Go ahead, Brian. All right. So the Veritas project was developed by GTI Energy and uses direct measurement technologies such as AMLD to support the development of company-specific emission factors. Based on our current reporting, our biggest sources of operational emissions are distribution mains, services, and customer meters. So this table on the slide compares emissions calculated using established EPA emission factors with preliminary company-specific emission factors for mains, services, and meters developed by the Veritas project. So while these results are only based on 1 year of data, our preliminary findings seem to indicate that our actual methane emissions may be lower than currently estimated using standard EPA emission factors. As additional survey data are collected and analyzed, we'll continue to refine our emission estimates and improve understanding of our system-wide methane emissions. Additionally, go ahead, Wesley.
Oh, thank you. Hi. Can you please, maybe you said it, but can you say again where the company's specific factors are come from?
So as part of the, we're using the Veritas project. So the Veritas project was developed by GTI, and it uses AMLD technology to capture direct measurements and then create these company-specific emission factors.
Okay, so it's just site-specific data coming from all of these places on your system versus.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Right now, we're focusing on mains, services, and meters as those are our biggest emission sources.
Do you have, I guess as a follow-up, is there a reason why they're so different than the EPA ones? Yeah, I think that helped me contextualize this a little bit more.
The EPA emission factors tend to be, I think, and Abby or Vigilia, if you're on the line, you're welcome to join in, tend to be more generalized, and they didn't, the data, the amount of data that they used to create these emission factors was very limited. Whereas we're going through our entire system and measuring everything in our entire system. And we're creating emission factors that are specific to our system in these states.
Thank you.
Sorry, go ahead, Abby.
I'll offer as well. Yeah, like Shauna said, the EPA, those established emission factors are ones that were developed from studies that didn't include possibly systems like we have that are newer, that are managed more tightly. We always believe that based on our operational field folks telling us those just don't look right. So Shauna talked about using Picaro, which we're driving around with this car and measuring every location. Well, most. I'd say, I can't remember if it's 90%. We call it like our whole system, but there are always little places that you can't exactly get to. And then we're extrapolating the emissions onto those locations. So we're measuring like our whole entire system, and we can pinpoint actual emission rates that are coming from that car from each individual meter that we have in GIS locations. So it's really fabulous that we can apply that technology in measuring actual emissions at those locations, and then compiling that and showing that in an emission factor units, comparing with the EPA units, and showing that we are so much lower that we expect. And we're doing more measurements to just confirm that. But really that first 1.5 years here have been really good. So hoping that also provides some context there, Wesley.
Yeah, it does. And I'm guessing that the EPA might have done a more limited sample set for their analysis, and maybe it was based on, a larger sample size of locations. So it could have had older systems, like you said. Yeah. So I think that makes sense. It's just a more granular study. So that's making sense. Thank you.
Yeah. So then additionally, the Department of Ecology under WOC 173441140 provides a pathway for regulated entities to petition for approval to use alternative greenhouse gas emissions calculation methodologies, which could allow the use of company-specific emission factors developed through the Veritas project in our reporting emissions to Washington's greenhouse gas reporting program. So that's another use that we hope to put this to. All right, go ahead, Brian. All right. In 2020, Washington enacted House Bill 2518 concerning the safe and efficient transmission and distribution of natural gas. The legislation requires investor-owned natural gas utilities and gas pipeline companies regulated by the UTC to track and report leak and emissions data annually to the UTC. So beginning in 2021 for reporting year 2020, we started reporting leak data to the UTC. At a federal level, Section 113 of the Pipes Act of 2020 directed PHMSA to develop federal leak and detection and repair requirements for gas pipeline operators. In anticipation of these requirements and to support methane emission reductions, the company implemented an internal policy starting in 2023 that required all identified leaks to be repaired within prescribed timelines based on leak classification and risk. The graph you see shows the emissions reported to the UTC for reporting years 2020 through 2025. Over that period, our reported emissions declined from approximately 6,800 metric tons of CO2e to approximately 1,000 metric tons. The most significant decrease occurred between 2022 and 2023. Although multiple factors can influence emissions, the timing of this reduction does align with the implementation of our internal repair policy and demonstrates the value of repairing all leaks.
All right.
Yep.
Thanks, Shauna. Are there any other questions on the operation emissions? Okay, I'm not seeing anything, so we'll continue to move along. Patrick?
Thank you, Brian. Hi, everyone. I'm Patrick Kinney, Thermal Energy Network Manager for Cascade Natural Gas. Today, we'll talk about thermal energy networks. So thermal energy networks are something relatively new to Cascade. In 2024, a law changed that enabled thermal energy networks to be deployed by Cascade. And it changed the definition of what a natural gas company is. So natural gas electrical companies, instead of just selling natural gas, we can offer thermal energy directly to end customers. The law also established a pilot program with a bunch of objectives and things to critique the 10 pilots against as a potential format for UTC lawmakers, utilities to all learn what does it take to make a thermal energy network, what does it take to get these things up and running. And Brian, I'm going to mute you. So we have these laws on the book since 2024 that established the pilot program, changed our definition. There's also been some other legislation that has come along. So House Bill 1514, the TINS 2.0 legislation, didn't really change anything for the regulated utilities. All the core components are the same, but that legislation broadened up what TINs are and allows basically private companies to own and operate TINs as well in Washington State, and brings them into a potential regulatory framework as well with that law. Now in Oregon, there is no TINs legislation. There was an attempt last year to introduce TIN specific legislation to Oregon, but that did not pass. But that continues to be a topic and will probably happen sometime in the future. So diving a little bit, or next slide, please. I'm sorry, can you go back one? I'm just clicking buttons. So we're allowed to do TINs, but what are TINs? So TINs are meant to sell thermal energy directly to customers, and it's network thermal energy is kind of what the colloquial term is. And we can sell heating energy to customers, we can sell cooling energy to customers, we can sell ambient water that customers can put energy in and about. It's a pretty broad term in Washington for what exactly can be done. And the neat things about these is that they can include a plethora of different energy sources. We can take energy from the ground, we can take energy from the air, we can take energy from sewers, we can take energy from waste heat opportunities like grocery store heat rejection, data center heat rejection, process heating and cooling. Basically anything under the sun that we can potentially reuse and refine to sell off energy to end customers. So it's a pretty broad and pretty neat legislation to have forward. And that has a lot of opportunities for decarbonization. In selling thermal energy, the idea is that we eliminate on-site combustion. The law requires it to be combustion free, so we have a decarbonization component already. And then also the ability to combined heating and cooling allows us to do some other things that help offset other emissions from like the electrical grid or any sort of on-site customer usage. Cascade has been pretty involved in TINs. My whole position was created because we're trying to respond to this potential legislation. We've been participating in the Utility Network Geothermal Collaborative, which is natural gas companies across the entire country are getting together and trying to understand, hey, how do we do thermal energy networks? What does that look like? We have also stood up the UTC working group, which we've had a few meetings on, where we're trying to have a local focus between the local distribution companies and UTC and other stakeholders to come together about, hey, how do we do this? How do we answer questions before and try and make sure that we're all marching in the same beat? And then also too, we have a targeted TIN pilot to help try and understand what TINs are for the company and how we can integrate these and potentially do them into the future. Next slide, please. So TIN benefits, why are we doing TINs? Why is there so much buzz and energy around them? First and foremost is higher energy efficiency. When you have network systems, you generally have higher energy efficiencies than standalone buildings themselves, standalone heating and cooling systems. It's also a potential way to decarbonize systems at scale. So instead of building by building, if you have a network system, you're kind of targeting neighborhoods at a time. So you get a lot more bang for your buck when you look at it from this utility network perspective. There's also a lot of synergies with energy codes and performance standards. So because we have higher innate energy efficiencies, it means that new buildings coming on meet energy codes easier. And then things like clean building performance standards, where there's ongoing energy use targets. TINs offers a great way to help building owners meet those long-term targets, especially as they potentially ratchet down into the future. Something really big that's kind of the main focal point right now is how TINs can potentially mitigate the grid impacts from electrification. So you're seeing a lot of studies come out, and that's what this chart on the right is, of when you look at network systems as compared to individual electrification, you're seeing a much higher grid impact than you would with that standalone electrification. So people go out and do air source heat pumps, that's pretty taxing on the electrical grid. But if instead all those heat pumps were connected to a thermal energy network, you're seeing much less grid impact and much more benefit to the grid. So that's something that's an evolving research that's pretty interesting, because it actually allows for electrification at scale, whereas we're running into constraints on kind of building by building electrification. Another aspect too is that these systems are more resilient as compared to air source heat pumps. When you have energy coming from the ground or waste heat or just improved energy efficiency overall, extreme weather events just don't impact these systems as much as air source heat pumps. If it's really cold air, these systems don't care. If it's really hot outside, the same thing. If you're sourcing from the ground or waste heat, you really don't see the impact. So there's another kind of resiliency component that's pretty neat to TINs that you don't get on an individual electrification basis. Next slide. Or Wesley?
Yeah, quick question on benefits. I understand that this is all new and emerging, but I'm wondering if Cascade is thinking about or doing or has thoughts for future work to potentially quantify, maybe the benefit of some non-energy impacts. I'm thinking in this case, like a big one is customers now have access to air conditioning, whereas they might not have had it before. Um, that's a big value to the customer. Maybe not necessarily a benefit for the utility, but just thinking about the holistic benefits. I mean, that's in my mind, a strong reason for a customer to be interested in this. So, yeah, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, this is all really new, and I can say that we're trying to get through our 10 pilot first and foremost. So we're really trying to get our arms around the physical practicalities of doing this before we make really any big long-term projections, just because it is too new for us to actually, feel confident about knowing where it's going to go just yet.
All right, so that's helpful. So maybe once the pilots are done and you have more information to decide how you're going to move forward, you can potentially consider, I don't know, maybe doing some kind of survey or study of customers that now have AC and try and see if that can be captured in cost effectiveness. Okay. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah. So yeah, after we get a little bit firm grounding on what these systems are, what the real world efficiencies that we see versus, research papers, I think we'll be in a much better place to make, projections about what this looks like and how it can move forward in the future. Next slide, please. So speaking of pilot, we do have a pilot that we are attempting to execute on. It's up in Bellingham, Washington at the Bellingham Technical College. It's 2 buildings. These buildings have existing hot water heating infrastructure, which was important to us to try and find some simplification in a pilot process where we can. These are also 2 Tier 1 Clean Building Performance Standard buildings, so it's a nice dovetail into some of the synergies that TINS can provide. We're looking to provide heating and cooling to both of these buildings. They're existing hot water heating infrastructure, but on the cooling side, they do require some retrofit and renovation. So it's a good learning opportunity for us to learn about, hey, if we go into buildings that don't necessarily have cooling or don't have a lot of cooling, what does it take to retrofit those systems? What does it take to actually provide a new service altogether? So that was a nice little aspect for us as well. We'd be fully decarbonizing these 2 buildings because we'd be taking all of their heating systems online, so their space heating and their domestic hot water systems. And if this spread out to the whole campus, it'd be a fairly big energy use reduction. These 2 buildings alone, or if it's spread out to the whole campus, it'd be an EUI reduction of 26 for the whole campus, which is pretty big for them. They do meet their Clean Building Performance Standard Tier 1 EUI targets today, but if those ratcheted down in the future, this would be a great compliance path for them from a campus perspective. And then in total, there's about a 600 metric ton of carbon emissions that could be eliminated if all the buildings were connected to TIN. Now, this is a single commercial customer, but it is surrounded by single family residential. And the thinking is trying to develop some sort of anchor customer to test the waters, figure out the core components, and then you have the potential to expand out into the neighborhood and become a true neighborhood community-based TIN system. Additionally, with our pilot, we're using GeoExchange as the primary heat source and sink. We do plan to send out hot and chilled water service directly. That's mainly a function because the building's already hot water, so it made more sense from a pilot perspective to do that. But we still have heat recovery chillers. We still plan to fully maximize all the waste heat opportunities on site. The system is also highly energy efficient because we are using large heat recovery chillers. And again, we are capitalizing on innate heat recovery in the system. So it's a pretty interesting pilot and has a lot of potential benefits and learning opportunities from Cascade. Now, next slide, please. So briefly, just want to talk about the other LDC pilots. So there's 2 other pilots in Washington State. One's from Northwest Natural and one's from PSC. I just wanted to give the group a little bit of an update. So Northwest Natural's pilot is in their current rate case. That pilot did receive support from staff, interveners, and even public counsel, but was ultimately denied to be included in rates by the commission. That's not necessarily changing what we're doing, but it is something that we wanted to bring up that, hey, we do have this kind of weird situation popping up. And then in PSC's pilot, it is also, their pilot's also in their current rate case, but their pilot's not necessarily being received very well, hasn't received a lot of support from staff. In fact, I think staff is recommending the commission to deny it, at least at this point, even though it has received support from interveners. But yeah, it's kind of an interesting one. Final determination has been made, but that's also one that we're monitoring right now. So doesn't necessarily change our course so far, but just wanted to bring it out there that, hey, this is what we're monitoring, and the landscape may not be as favorable to TINs as it was about 6 months ago. Next slide. And then that's it for me. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. Are there any questions on TENS before we move on? I'm sorry for my mic being so loud. They're reorganizing the basement here and it's a little loud. Okay, I don't see any questions, so let's move on. I think Sean.
Yep, thanks, Brian. I'm Sean Henson. I'm our community affairs representative for Cascade Natural Gas in Washington State. Just a couple of slides on some of the activity in our jurisdictions. So the city of Bellingham passed an ordinance on February 7th, 2022, taking effect August 7th, 2022, which requires electric space and water heating equipment for new commercial and large multifamily buildings. It also requires incremental improvements in energy efficiency and solar installation readiness in those new buildings. And then in March 2024, the city repealed the local commercial energy code and adopted the 2021 Washington State Energy Code, the commercial energy code, without any local amendments. Next slide, please. And then for Whatcom County, on July 27, 2021, the county voted to ban the construction of new refineries, coal-fired power plants, and other fossil fuel-related infrastructure. And that doesn't constitute a gas ban, but may have impacts on distribution system enhancement projects if needed in Whatcom County. That's everything for me. Next slide, please.
And I'm Alan Spector, External Affairs Manager for Cascade, and I'll talk briefly about some developments with the City of Bend. So we've been working closely with the city for the last several years as they have worked on their climate priorities and some of their decarbonization goals. So their climate goals focus on reducing community fossil fuel usage by 40% by 2030, 70% by 2050. They want to achieve 100% renewable electricity, improve efficiency in buildings, support low carbon transportation as well. So we've worked with the city ongoing. Some of the efforts that we have done in tandem, or at least some like coordination with the city, has been development of a voluntary RNG program, which we now have deployed across Oregon, as well as a voluntary opt-in RNG program for Washington State as well. So that is available to the city of Bend and other customers in Oregon if they're interested in tapping into that. In addition, we've got ongoing development of a renewable natural gas facility at the Knott landfill. So that is a ongoing project, but that will be based out of the city of Bend. And then we were pretty excited. We have for the last, I guess, 7 or 8 months now, we've had a pilot dual fuel heat pump program, which pairs a new electric heat pump with an existing natural gas furnace. We had 24 homes ongoing across our service area in Bend, where we're testing for a few different factors, including overall carbon reductions, comfort to the customer, and energy efficiency. Next slide, please. So at the same time, the city of Bend is continuing to pursue pathways for them to reduce their fossil fuel usage. And one of the pathways that they are pursuing is a ordinance that is scheduled to take effect April 1st, 2027, where developers will be charged for installing hookups for key gas appliances in new residential construction. So this isn't a ban on gas, but it is a fee on gas equipment. It is based from 20% of the social cost of carbon, and it is based on the incremental carbon difference between natural gas and the electricity that's provided by Pacific Power and Central Electric Co-op. And so it's my understanding that right now that city staff is assessing based on Pacific Power's most recent projections of their ability to comply with their renewable energy mandates, what the carbon intensity would be incremental between us and the serving electric utilities. So we're going to continue to monitor and assess the impacts of the policy and overall what the impacts will be to gas usage in Bend. And of course, we're going to continue on with, pilot efforts and continuing to be good environmental stewards, for all of our communities as we've done. So we'll just continue to keep that engagement going with the city and see what we can do to be good partners. Next slide. So I'll turn it over to Elizabeth to speak about building codes.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. I'm Elizabeth Torsky. I'm Cascade Natural Gas's building code specialist in our external affairs group. And just to give a brief updates for Washington and Oregon, the Washington State Building Code Council has been working towards their 2024 energy code adoption for residential and commercial. They recently just had public comment hearings for their CR 102 of those codes. And the commission will now begin doing workshop meetings to discuss and respond to all the public comments that they have received. If they do adopt the code, the anticipated adoption date that they're working towards is September 25th, 2026, and then the effective date for these codes would be May 3rd, 2027. The proposed codes for the 2024 cycle still penalize natural gas, but there are some neat additions. As Patrick mentioned, we have TENS projects on our horizon. The Commercial Energy Code is now acknowledging TENS and giving some credit to those systems, which is fantastic and a great addition to the Energy Code. Some other proposals that have increased flexibility are in the Residential Code. One is a big change in the Residential Code. There used to be just 3 categories for building sizes. And depending on which size of building you were in for your residence, you would then have to get a certain number of additional credits. Those categories have gone from 3 categories to 9 categories. And this allows for the ease of construction for smaller dwellings. Before, these smaller dwellings had a higher burden to meet these energy credit requirements. So hopefully this provision change will allow for more affordable housing to be built. There also is a new addition for Washington's residential energy code. It's been in the national codes, but there's an energy rating index compliance pathway. This was added to give a little more flexibility. So certain elements in a building, if they're done in this energy rating index method, will offset some other provisions that in the code as it is in the 21 version, you may not be able to achieve compliance with some of these methods. And finally, in the commercial code, they've really reworked all the sections that previously had the fossil fuel compliance path, which they added in the 21 code. They've now basically eliminated that and just dealt with fuel types through a revised credit table. And I wish I had a little more information on that credit table, but none of the values for that credit table were published by the State Building Code Council. That work is still ongoing. And that may actually trigger a refiling of the CR 102 if those values are now published, but that remains to be seen. For Oregon, Oregon's residential specialty code includes Chapter 11, which is their energy efficiency provision. So basically their residential energy code. Public hearings for that code will be August 18th. There is a provision in that code that is requiring the installation of electric heat pumps capable of heating and cooling for any existing home whose AC fails and needs to be replaced. This does make it a little bit harder for folks to replace equipment like for like in existing buildings. But we'll be monitoring that to see if that gets approved. And that's kind of my building code update for the time being.
All right. Thank you, Sean, Alan, and Elizabeth. Are there any questions for the local policy or building codes? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. We do have one more slide of material and then we'll wrap it up. So if people can stick around, that's great. If not, just a reminder that this meeting is recorded and will be posted to our website. So on a national focus, we are continuing to monitor several federal developments that could affect appliance standards, energy efficiency planning, emissions reporting, and broader resource planning assumptions. DOE's proposed revisions to its appliance standards process rule would not affect existing standards, but could make future standards more difficult to adopt. Separately, recent DOE activity on clothes dryers and residential water heaters may affect baseline equipment assumptions, which is important because baseline efficiency influences the savings potential of our energy efficiency programs. EPA activity is also important to monitor. Proposed Energy Star changes for natural gas furnaces and potential treatment of hybrid heat pump technologies could create program impacts or opportunities. On the reporting side, EPA's Subpart W updates are currently on hold while the greenhouse gas reporting program is reconsidered, but parallel reporting platforms are being developed, including the University of Texas at Austin and the Washington Department of Ecology. Finally, EPA is reconsidering the 2024 carbon pollution standards for fossil fuel fired power plants, with final action still pending. The key takeaway of this is that much of this remains in motion with a lot of uncertainty. Cascade's approach is to continue monitoring these developments and assess impacts to our programs and planning assumptions as final direction become clear. Are there any questions on the national focus? Okay. All right, so I want to open it up. Is there any other comments, feedback, thoughts, suggestions, recommendations from anyone in terms of environmental policy? Anything you may want to would like to see in a future tag meeting. Okay, while people think on that, I'm going to run through these last two slides just to. Oh, I see, Byron, you have a question.
Yeah, ideas about future environmental policy within the IRP. If memory serves, are you guys planning to do kind of a repeat of the last IRP where you had a scenario that showed compliance with like statewide emission goals? Do you plan to iterate on that in future technical advisory group meetings?
Yes, we'll include that as a scenario. Yep.
Okay. And will that scenario just be looking at how the portfolio responds to like the changing price signals, or will it be including how customers respond to that changing portfolio over time?
It'll be both. Yeah, as we try to increase our analysis on electrification and customer response, we'll try to include as much information on how customers may react to the different scenarios.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yep. So the remaining schedule.
Sorry,
oh,
could
go
I-
ahead, Leslie. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted
No
to
problem.
jump in on the national focus specific to the efficiency updates with Energy Star. I'll be honest, I remember learning about that when it was fresh, and it's been a while since I looked into it, so I don't know what kind of updates have been made in that regard. But yeah, noting that your team is monitoring potential impacts and opportunities, I would just say it'd be nice and useful if the conservation team could potentially update the that advisory group as updates happen. Specifically curious on what kind of opportunities it might present for that program. So, and I'm sure that's already on your agenda, but just wanted to verbalize it as staff's interest. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Wesley. I appreciate that, and I'll definitely follow up with Caleb and make sure all of that's on their radar. I'm sure it is. But thank you. So the remaining schedule, so we have two targeted tag meetings left, one on distribution system planning in 3 weeks, and then on resource integration and equity and IRP in another 3 weeks from the next target tag. And then we'll go into our longer tag meetings. These are the tag meetings where we'll focus on locking down information. We'll be presenting more results rather than just methodology. So we're really trying to lock down the analysis. So for example, we'd like to lock down the forecast as soon as we can after that tag one. That way we can move forward with our other tag meetings, as those will include impacts from what the load forecast says. So tag one, October 14th, tag two, November 18th. We will file a first draft that'll include, I think, the first 6 to 7 sections of the IRP. And then we'll ask for comments due back on January 20th. We'll hold a tag 3 in February, and then a month later we'll file the final draft and asking for feedback to be due by April 9th. And then tag 4, if needed, if there's any information that people want to see that wasn't presented in any of the other tag meetings, we're happy to hold a 4th tag meeting. And And then we plan to have the final complete by May 19th and filed by May 21st. So just a quick reminder, our next targeted tag meeting, it will be targeted tag 6, not 7. And that will be held on Wednesday, September 2nd. And just a reminder, you can contact us at irp@cngc.com. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. If there's any information that didn't make sense or was confusing, please reach out. We're happy to sit down and talk about things, even if it's just a quick 5-minute call. Happy to do that. Okay, so I'm gonna open it up one last time for any questions, comments, thoughts, feedback.
Hi, Wesley again.
Yeah, what's up?
Super quick question. Sorry, I made a note of it earlier, then I forgot to ask. But regarding the TENS project in Bellingham, I am curious when the company plans to seek recovery of the expenses and when. Really just trying for my own awareness to know what to look out for. So
Yeah, I can answer that. So we have our current rate recovery plan in our current rate case. We're not seeking recovery right now, but our current plan is to include this in the CCA recovery mechanism 2028 because our pilot project in service date doesn't line up with our current rate case filing. So we do have some description about what our plan is in our current rate case filing, and it is that CCA rate recovery mechanism.
okay, that's super helpful. And the 2028 recovery mechanism, does that occur in the prior years, so 2027, or will that come in 2028? I always get
It'll come in 2028.
Okay, so yeah, we don't have more work on our plate just yet. So that sounds good. Appreciate it.
Now, no work just yet, but there is description about our project and all that stuff in our current rate case. So we're hoping to get some sort of, hey, some sort of feedback on our pilot at this point.
Appreciate the information. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, are there any other questions? Yeah, I'm not seeing anything, nothing in the chat. So thanks everyone for joining. I appreciate the conversation and the questions we got.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Yep.